Welcome one and all to episode 7 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week we are going through the highs and lows of Gather Round, the second consecutive Gather Round, and it's been a hell of a ride this year. And there's some news about what's going on with the next couple of years for Gather Round. We might get into that. We don't know. We might not. We'll see what time we have. We'll also talk about a couple of MRO decisions. They're pretty basic this week, which is pretty easy to go through, and an interesting little stat that I discovered earlier today that I kind of want to talk about. But let's get on with it. How are you doing, Mr. Psyrick?
Not too bad, not too bad. As always, randomly in a different location.
You just
Now sitting a bit further down south. Yeah. I mean, for how many homes I've done this podcast, I've owned 0 myself, so
There's nothing wrong with that.
work that one out. Sometimes stats are misleading.
I mean, at the moment you're 3-3. At the moment, I'm only 1-1. I have not moved.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, apart from that, it's been good. Looking after a little doggo. Might hear a few noises, hopefully not, but he is a well-behaved little pupper.
Oh, that's all good. As you can see on the YouTube video, I have updated our tips for this week. Psyrick is now back in the lead on 25, and I am slumming it down on 23, which if in one of our comps, I am at the very bottom. And in my work comp, I am close to the very bottom.
Spectrum. You think too much. You can't think too much when you tip.
I took a gamble.
I think the podcast has made us worse. Or
Yeah,
at least
maybe.
an excuse, I'm going to say.
I have too much faith in the umpires in giving Freo fair run.
Oh.
We'll get into that.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
I'm going to start with the opening game of Gather Round with Adelaide and Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval. Scoreline was 8-15-63 to 10-18-78. For the most part, it was a pretty thrilling game, but poor goal kicking from the Crows kind of let them down because I reckon they had a pretty clear edge against Melbourne. For example, their midfield team and their halfbacks were really, really damaging. Matt Crouch had 30 touches, and 7 Crows all above 23 touches. Saligo, Smith, Laird, Hinge, Keane, and Jordan Dawson, their captain. So I think they have they're showing good signs despite the early season woes from the Crows, which is, a very good thing. Hopefully with more time, season's still early. We're only in round 4. So hopefully with more time, we'll actually see them in a position that they were in last year. But
maybe I'm not as bullish yet, but I think there were definitely a lot of signs.
I mean, we just want healthy. We just want healthy competition, right?
They're a bit above that stage. They'll get some wins against some easier opponents, but as I said, it's just it was just good to see a few more marks, a few more shots. I think Rankin probably was I know he's 1 goal free, but if he was converting, he was presenting well. And, I said last week that you wanted something to happen. And I think, Rankin getting back into the contest might be one of the ways. And, as you said, the midfield.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with their attacking game style this week. Especially compared to the last couple of weeks.
There's still a bit. They're not 100%. But I think, as you said, there was definitely a lot better, especially all the inside 50s. They weren't as...
They got plenty of center clearances as well.
Yeah, that too. They weren't just, beaten. So, I agree. It's not.
Yeah, it's just their conversion by foot is what was letting them down.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, I think it's definitely building to at least... I don't think they'll go back to number 1 in the competition, especially with some of the other sides. But they'll at least get it a bit better than worst, or down the bottom.
Bailey Fritsch for the Demons. I think he could be the most accurate goal kicker so far this season.
Yeah,
I don't think he's really missed when he's been able to present.
No, it was pretty early in that game, and if I did actually see a little stat thing and I know I mentioned it last week. X scores, one of my favorite things to look at. And Melbourne are very much above the rest of the competition in terms of that. They are just
Is that just shot on
converting a
goal
bit more
accuracy,
than you
or
would
is that
expect.
just all across the field?
No, so it's all across the field. So
Okay.
even loose ball gets, like, they're all determined on, in that particular moment, in that particular like circumstance,
Mhm.
it just goes through what's the league expects that result to be, and then compares it to what actually happened. And Melbourne have just been converting. They're above average. I mean, most teams will even out. So Melbourne are like currently about 5 or 6 goals. It's ridiculous
It is still
above
fairly early
what
in the
they should.
season, so it will mellow
But
out.
as I said, it generally averages out where
Mhm.
most clubs get back to plus or minus, not that much above or below. But right now, it's a good time because, as I said, their defense have had a few injuries
Mhm.
and they've been, challenged by a few good teams, but they've just been overcome it. But hey, their defense still being fantastic, and B, them just converting so well. Because I don't even think their forward line structures that fantastic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I
they're
get that.
not dominating in the tall forwards. Their smalls are a bit up and down. Obviously, we'll talk about Cosy Pickett being suspended, but yeah, when the ball goes to ground, they're here and there.
Yeah.
As but overall, this game was pretty good though. Um, Bit
A-
wasteful, but
As always, Brownlow medalist Christian Petrarca in career best form right
yeah,
now.
I
Um,
love him.
having 29 touches, 8 clearances, 5 tackles, 7 inside 50s, and 10 score involvements. He was pretty much in his Brownlow best form, I think.
Yeah, and especially with uh, Clary having a bit of a down year, like which we all thought might have happened. It was a big off season,
Yeah,
it's hard to get through that,
we
but
don't
it
need to
is
talk about
good to
that.
see. Yeah, not too much, but like as I said, I think it's just a good sign of a team where, like, even if it wasn't, for personal reasons, if it was just form, like Viney and Petrarca have just stepped up so much.
Mm.
You've got young Judd McPhee, like he's more on halfback, but
I
some
was
of his bowl years when he goes up into the middle
I
is
was going to mention
fantastic.
McVeigh actually because I think he's a really quiet
Yeah.
achiever and a really important player to watch this season for him.
Yeah. I think some of the commentators are like really on him and they've picked up some of his moments, which are good, but like it's really been one of the better second year players. I think it's second year, but
Yeah, this is
um,
his second year.
yeah,
Or
honestly,
I
it's
know he was in the league last year. I
fantastic.
don't know about the years prior,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, he's having a really good season so far. It started off really really well. Thankfully, no injuries from this game, which
Mhm.
is good. You like to see both teams healthy going into next week. Um, so yeah, is there anything more we want to touch on with that game?
Oh, unless you want to, I guess you can do the MRO at the end because you
Yeah,
pick
I'm
it.
gonna do the MRO at the end, so we don't have to worry
Yeah,
too
cool.
much.
No, it's yeah, as I said, it was a pretty overall good performance by Melbourne, and yeah, as I said, Adelaide. It's much what you said about last week. It's just there's been, a slight improvement. I think as well marking. That's definitely what Adelaide got back into their game as well.
Mm.
I want to say. I think it was
Good
like,
good weather helps with that.
yeah, exactly. But as I said, it's like Taylor Walker. I know he's been inaccurate, but it's still 10 marks. A fair chunk of those was inside the forward 50. I think it was 3 or 4 when I looked at it.
Yeah, I
But
think that's correct.
um, yeah. So even if it's inaccurate, it still helps with distribution. It's still overall a positive. So hopefully that builds. Yeah, after what was a pretty disappointing first few weeks for the Crows.
Yeah,
And yeah, they'll get their win back on the board soon.
yeah, I agree. You've got Friday night's game. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, well, we'll gloss over when we do some of the less interesting rounds for Brisbane and North Melbourne. So we'll go to, I mean, this wasn't as exciting, but Port Adelaide, so I'm
Yeah,
going to talk about it.
go on. I'll let you
Port
read.
Adelaide, that's all right. 17-9, 111 versus 6-6, 42 from Essendon.
I
When it
don't
started,
I
it
don't
looked.
think anyone was really surprised by that scoreline.
I think there's a bit from the first quarter, because as I said, it would look like it was going to be a tough fought contest first, and really Essendon started ahead of the gun. They were dominating possession, and getting a lot more inside 50s than Port,
Mm-hmm.
and Port just got really just goals against the grain. I think a couple of the early ones, and this is going to be the theme of the night, were from the centre bounce. They're able to get something quick back.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just pretty, very bad from Essendon after quarter time. They were just smashed in the centre circle. And it's like one of those things where, is it was a lot of goals and like it was bad, but it just felt like it filtered through the whole team, and it just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. I just It just made them feel unsettled, and I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago from the team meter Peter bump, and it was like, oh, Essendon's, going for that toughness and all that sort of thing, which as I said, it's whatever, but. I think this was like the game where I think this comes to bite you a bit
Because Port
because this
are a
clearly
tough
was a team.
team.
Yeah, but this was clearly like a team that wasn't tough themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the fact that we're just completely dismantled, like as I said, you can go tough, but if you're a team that really can't bring the contest if the other team's just going to play a very dominant, uncontested possession brand game, which
Mm-hmm.
Port do fantastically. They just grab the ball, hold it, work it to attack. Some of their forward movement, is a bit lackluster, but they lock it in there. And against bad teams, you've seen it throughout the last whole of Hinkley's tenure. They just dominate bad teams
Mm-hmm.
because if you let them do what they want with the ball, they've got a lot of talent.
Yeah, very true.
Um, so yeah. So as mentioned, Soldo was just a complete threat.
Yeah,
Tapped it
sounds
to
about right.
Jason Horse Francis and Rosie from the centre circles. The centre clearances were 19-6. And the most damaging thing was they were unopposed. Like when Jason Hearn, Francis, and Rosie broke through the line, like there wasn't any pressure coming from like the half forward or, there was just they were just able to walk it to the 50-meter line and take a shot or
Mm-hmm.
have their pick of their targets inside 50. And yeah, Essendon with their attack was just really wing focused. There was very little movement from the center of the ground, and it just sort of forced an attack that only really got going whenever Port made a turnover,
Yep.
which, as I mentioned, was mainly in the first quarter. Yeah, and it was just a bit uninspired, really. Port's backline, I thought they were comfortable all night, especially, after last week's man. I thought it was a bit harshly raised how they might not be that all that. Yeah, and it was Rats, Zach Thatcher, Aaliyah. They were all synergizing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was just their ability to actually push up because they do play a high press, but they were getting a lot more intercepts from that dump kick from in between the 50-meter arc. Um, Houston was one that actually got a lot of those sort of intercepts. He had a pretty good milestone game,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, on the flip side, the Dons were undersized. There's not really too much you can do about it. They're players that they have missing.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be a tough matchup for them. And yeah, they got caught out. 12 marks inside 50 from 63 entries. So one in every six were marked inside. Yeah, it's sort of just creates a lot of goal scoring opportunities. And of course, as always, Merritt was by far the hardest worker, strongest person in the middle for the Dons. But yeah, as I
He
said, it just
he does his best to try and lead by example, being the captain, but sometimes
yeah,
it just the
and
followers just don't follow.
and as yeah, and that's the thing is like you need all the parts in the center circle because I say Jason Horn, Francis, and Rosie, but like when the ball was in the contest, you have Willem Drew who, when it wasn't won by Port, his tackling pressure means that Essendon don't get out as fast. And that's really what Essendon was missing. Like, it wasn't just the fact they were losing the centre clearances, is that they weren't defending at all from them. And yeah, as I said. So, it was really, anytime the play was stopped, Port just looked way too threatening.
Yep.
And obviously, I mentioned this before, the Dons were hurt on defense by Ridley re-injuring his quad before the match. He'll miss a chunk of games. And Archie Perkins was fantastic, I thought, for the first quarter, more so. Second, he really didn't get as much, but same with the Dons team. But yeah, he only managed half the game before he got a hamstring injury, which was a bit disappointing because it's a very useful player for the Dons. Probably one of the more threatening players up forward for the Dons. They don't really have any like deepish threats at the moment. And yeah, that is just one that the Dons can sort of look something for. But yeah, it's just unfortunate that he's going to miss out a bit. And yeah, that's about all I really got to say about that. I do my Limelight and Spotlight. I didn't actually check the AFL to see what they had. So in the Limelight, the usual suspects: Jason Horn-Francis, Rosie, Soldo, Zek, Brandon Zek Thatcher, who I've named ZBT in my notes. I always do that. Rioli, fantastic on the ground. I'm probably a bit harsh not to mention him. I think as a small forward, for what Port's asked him to do, he's always been pretty lively. And on the flip side, Merritt had a fantastic game. Mackay was pretty solid in defense. Wasn't really helped out by the amount of entries, but I think he held his own. And Xavier Dersma. Essendon were doing all their play through the wing, and Dersma was the key contributor to that. And, as I said, while it didn't pan out, I think,
he is their best run and carry.
Exactly. Like, I think it was just more that Dersma just had. It would have helped if he had some more inside options to maybe turn some of his disposal into score involvements. But I think his presence was pretty fantastic. And in the Spotlight, Houston, as I said, probably not quite as dominant as he can be, but still a fantastic game for a milestone. And talking about milestones, I didn't even realize it. Georgiades.
It was Georgiades milestone.
From injuries, is 50. I didn't realize he got injured on 49. So, and he struggled converting, but his presence was fantastic, especially from ACL. So, absolutely fantastic.
This is his
Willem Drew. Oh, sorry.
Fourth season? If he missed a year with an ACL?
Yeah. So, and it's one of those things where it's always been a great presenter. And yeah, he just compliments Marshall because Marshall, I think, said better. He's a more score involvement player where Georgie's just got that ability. Like, he's a great marking presence, pretty solid kick. I mean, so is Marshall, but Georgie's more likely to take that mark closer to goal. Whereas, Marshall's really good pushing up, and it's quite a good duo. And Willem Drew, as I said, for last one for Port. Again, hard nut in the middle, compliments. As I said, it's just how you make that midfield so cohesive. And just for Essendon, I think Dyson Happel still showed a lot of leadership in that match. Distribution off halfback was pretty solid, and the ball was down there a lot. I think, even though there was a lot of down players for Essendon, and normally, sometimes Heppel's one of those players that are like, when he was captain and all that leadership stuff. I thought it was pretty solid that game. I think he did his job quite well. And I think that's about all. And Travis Boak got an injury. It was back problem. I think it was more sort of a management thing. I haven't heard anything.
I would assume it'd be a management thing considering his age.
Yeah, I would imagine another game at Adelaide Oval. I don't think they'll rest him. I think if he's anywhere near fit, they'll put him back on the park.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I now I'm going to move on to the Battle of the Birds. The West Coast Eagles versus the Sydney
Oh, yeah.
Swans. Now, the whole
Yeah, yeah.
reason, like normally we probably wouldn't have touched this game because it's West Coast. Like we'd only really like make minor notes on this. But the only reason why I want to go a little bit more in depth in this is because West Coast looked really good up
Yeah,
until like maybe halfway through the third into the fourth. Like it started to drift
yeah,
away and Sydney started to pull away. But
yeah.
West Coast were really impressive considering how they've been, considering what they've been through over the past
Oh,
couple of years. And
exactly. And I'll get the scoreline quickly.
it's 11, 12,
Eagles,
78 to 15, 14,
yeah,
104. So, yeah, as I
and
said, Sydney pulled away, kind of expected
yeah,
them
it
to win.
did. But I think, like as I said, you look at the quarters, and honestly, I think you can honestly make a claim that West Coast won three of those quarters because it was a game with the wind,
Yeah,
and
it was.
when Sydney had the wind, they were kept. It was about a 2 goal breeze, maybe 3 goal breeze,
Mhm.
and they were kept at most 2 goals ahead at every change. It was very disappointing actually because I remember I thought, oh, West Coast have it, like a good chance, is very near. And I mean, you'll say how good his game was, but made an unfortunate error. Harley Reid coming off the bench, just walked into the what do you call it? The protected meter zone.
Yeah,
I think
everywhere
Matt
50.
Roberts.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, as I said, especially a young kid, you're probably thinking about all the roles, get a bit excited that you're in a game with a chance to win, but yeah, and it just felt a bit out of reach. But yeah, West Coast defense did really well, I think, except in the last, but that was I think they were a bit
Again,
run out.
they're a young rebuilding team. They would have just run out of
Mhm.
legs, It's
And our legs and a couple of injuries as well didn't help, of course.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through that. So I'll start with mentioning Liam
Mhm.
Duggan, who led the disposal list with 30 touches. Very good game
Mhm.
from him. But I think Elliot Yeo was West Coast best on ground. He had
Yeah.
28 touches, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 9 inside 50s, 6 score involvements.
Mhm.
He was doing so much this week.
Yeah.
And he really
And
needed to because
yeah.
they need someone with a lot of experience to be able to build, rebuild this team around. Especially as they're
Yeah.
probably going to lose McGovern in the next couple of years. And he's like, they're one of their most experienced players at the moment, apart from like Shannon Hearn or whoever else is
Oh,
still around. I can't remember if Hearn's retired.
no, Hearn is retired.
I guess
I
Gaff would
mean,
be their
obviously,
oldest, maybe.
Gaff is. I'm not even sure Gaff's the oldest. He's only 32. He's just, lost a lot of speed, which is what he based his game around. Darling would be the oldest,
Oh
I
yeah,
think.
Darling would be the oldest. That's
Duggan
right.
might be. I
Duggan's
think
not too far
Duggan's
off. I think
same
Duggan's late
age as Gaff.
20s.
No, I think he's 30s, but I don't know. Anyway,
But yeah, like someone like Elliot Yeo is a good player to like rebuild a young team around because
yeah,
he's
exactly.
very
And it wasn't just
consistent,
that. Yeah,
even with West Coast being in their down years. And he's a very consistent
yeah,
player when he's not injured.
yeah. And
And
it was
he's
just when you got Sydney's midfield, obviously they had a bit of outs, but he was matched up on Warner. And I think some of the knock of some of the Eagles veterans is like they're not always putting in defensive efforts and
mhm.
all that sort of stuff. And like Warner still had a good game, but he wasn't as dangerous as he can be. And I thought he might be
Okay.
sort of the player with a few outs. I mean, obviously Heaney was fantastic, but
I'm about to
I
go
thought,
through some Sydney stats that I was really impressed
yeah,
with. So yeah,
yeah,
after Richmond upsetting them last week, they weren't expecting it. We weren't expecting it. They fought back really hard with strong contested ball movement, especially through the middle. So
mm,
Heaney finished with 26 touches, 7 clearances, 6 tackles, 5 inside 50, 10 score involvements. Errol Golden, possible Brownlow chance this year. 25 touches, 6 clearances, 6 tackles, 7 inside 50s. Grundy finished with 20 touches, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, and 5 score involvements. I think he's actually really learned how to play better around the ground, not just as a ruck player. Because
yeah.
like
I
it was
don't
it was something
know.
he kind of already
It
had
went down.
going
Yeah,
into like Melbourne
exactly.
and Collingwood, but it wasn't really as
Yeah.
prominent because he wasn't the number one rock.
Yeah, it was like the
Whereas,
last year of Collingwood and Melbourne. So it was like the last 2 years where
whereas I think
in
at
his time he
Sydney,
was,
he is the number one rock, and I think he's
yeah,
learned off of other number one rocks who have more involvement around the ground how to
yeah,
play that sort of role, and he's looked really, really good at it. And then James
yeah,
Rowbottom, who I thought was incredible against Richmond last week, he was easily Sydney's best player last week. Finished with 19 touches, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, and 6 score involvements as well.
yeah. Yeah, it was a
Um,
bit funny. It's normally a lot more tackle, a lot less, involved. But yeah, he just got around distributing
yeah.
this time. I think it's
Um,
like one of those things. Yeah, he's because sisters in the women's AFL, and I think they've got like a brother sister ridiculous tackling record.
yeah, it's
Just insane.
pretty interesting, those sort of statistics. Sydney had 10
Yeah.
separate players hit the scoreboard out of their 15-14 scoreline, including star recruit Taylor Adams kicking his first goal for the
Yeah.
Swans.
It was
No?
not imposing, but he was very good on his return.
It's a win. You take the win in your first game
Yeah.
back.
Exactly.
Unfortunate injuries for West Coast to Luke Edwards with a hamstring and Ryan Marriage to the ribs, which are
Punctured lung, went to hospital, probably missing a few.
pretty heavy to come back from. He might
Yeah.
we'll probably take him. What are we in? Next week's round 5. Probably at least maybe round 8, round 9. You'd give him
Yeah,
some.
I'd
You
take
give
a
him
month
some
or
time.
something. Yeah, exactly. And it's just so hard to move when you have aerobically move. I mean,
No,
especially Marichi can actually run a bit. So
yeah,
yeah, bit of a
West
shame
Coast
there.
would probably want to take some time with that, which means
No point rushing him.
we just hope that their injury list doesn't keep growing, because this progress that we've seen from them this week is really, really positive, and I'm hoping it
Yeah.
doesn't come back to bite me.
Look, I mean, they've got, as you're obviously saying that because they're up against Richmond.
Yes.
I think they've got shown signs that they can possibly put themselves in a position to win. But I think, like obviously, you don't want to be too negative. But as I said, it's so important to try and do as much as you can to secure those wins when you can, because football can be a very fickle game. But definitely, while West Coast has been in that very low period, it is so important, to just hammer that home. It's like, okay, this is what we did. And they took away some of Sydney's strengths. They didn't let them mark it uncontested. They really, and they controlled the game for a lot of parts. They really could have actually had more of a lead at times. But as I said, young team, especially from that dearth. But as I said, although you could say cynically, they did give up 100 points. This was a game with a huge win. There was a lot of shots being converted from outside 50. And I think a lot of their players, Tom Cole, Brady Hoff, and obviously Tom Barras, McGovern, obviously terrific down back. They were again talking about, why not put him forward? Why not put him forward? But, as I said, you got to, especially with an Eagles team that aren't that gelled forward line, you can't concede too many points.
You'd much rather try to have a solidified backline.
Yeah. Although massive win game theory.
Go on.
Each quarter you're switching from back to front, So when you're up against the win, you're not getting as many conceded entries. Maybe put him forward. I'd like to have seen them be a bit more creative, but I think the backline's just where McGovern has to live.
It's not
majoritively.
It's not a bad idea. I'll be honest with you.
That's a bit hack theory. Like it does mean you're forcing McGovern to really change the flow of his game. You're changing other defensive.
You'd rather try and keep consistency than anything else.
It's something that you might do on like AFL Live 2024 or whatever. You know what I mean? When like that literally doesn't affect players. But I do think at times, especially in the fourth quarter, maybe McGovern could have been put up there. But I think it was the early crow. Just I don't like that straight switch. Idea from Darling and McGovern. You know, and there's honestly no guarantee McGovern's that great in front of goals. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it was the problem with his brother Mitch. You know, he would take those marks for Carlton in the forward line, but he was just so bad at converting. You know, it's like you're centralizing against a player that's just not gonna convert. You know, so it's like it may just be the same problem with Darling anyway. Obviously, Darling's not bringing the ball ground as much, and you know he's still got a bit to work on. Unfortunately, he'll probably be the Eagles' whipping boy for much of this year. But
yeah,
yeah, as I said, hopefully with some more competitive games, and as the year goes on, games get a bit more condensed. Players like not McGovern, Darling, won't need to have as much speed, which is where he's really been lacking. You know, he's not getting space. You know, he might find that when contests get Carter late, he might find a few back year goals. You don't want him to be doing that, but I mean, what are you going to do at this point? They've got no one else up forward really taking that role.
Yeah, especially with Oscar Allen out, you don't really have many options.
Exactly. It's just you put up with it. You hope he has a few good games, and you hope those few good games line up to where the Eagles might pinch off a win.
Although the idea of putting a defender up forward, especially like if we know that they can take marks, isn't a bad call considering something that happened in the Hawthorn game, which I'm going to touch on.
Yeah, like I don't hate the idea. It's just a bit.
It's just right now
one of those things that on paper, like, yeah, I mean, it's like they've still got Waterman as well. You know, he kicked a couple of games, so I think I'd rather see him get a bit more involved. You know, maybe have him take some more proper leading patterns, and you know, if you know Darling's not going to be a deep threat, maybe push him up. You know, you just want something a bit different. You know, so it's not just bombing the ball long to not a contest that can just be intercepted. But
playing more as a centre half forward rather than a deep forward.
Yeah, and because they've got, and you look at the Eagles' attack, they've got a lot of their goals scored higher. You know, Petra Cooley,
Petrocelli.
Noah Long scored a few. Yeah, sorry, I was calling that. Yeah, and obviously, you know, Jamie Cripps. He sometimes, you know, is a player that can play deep, but you know, when the ball doesn't go to ground, he can also push up, try and find avenues. So yeah, I think while they're bad, I think they just got to work on how they get it. But you know, while they've been smashing the midfield, it's been very hard to see how these formations can happen because the ball hasn't been going inside 50. So and you know, it's been 2 weeks where they've been fairly competitive. Like they haven't been beaten in disposals. They're similar in clearance. You know, so they can work on that, and they should see improvement. And you know, it might just be, again, like a lot of people say, the baby steps for a few more interesting games for the Eagles.
That is very, very fair assessment. Sorry, I just had to remember I had to bring up something to talk about later.
No, that's all good.
Shall we move on to... do you want to move on to Dogs and Cats?
Yes, please.
We both kind of went on a rant with West Coast Sydney.
Yeah, an absolute treat of a game. I absolutely love this contest. I'd watched most of the games before this one, and I was feeling like a bit burnt out, and I was like, you know, I better, you know, go into this, take notes on it, you know, try and switch on. But yeah, it was just that exciting. It sort of did liven me up. And yeah, it was I would say it's a contest where nearly every player had an impact on the contest at some point. The way I would shape the game was, and sorry, I should say the score. I always forget to do this. The Bulldogs were 14-7-91 to Geelong 14-11-95. So it was really scoring shots that separated the two teams. And Geelong, they sort of controlled the majority of the match. They didn't really lose the lead. Many times it wasn't a back and forth game, but it was just a Geelong that were so structurally matched up really well, and for the majority of the Bulldogs' attack, They were countering, again, like I mentioned in the Port game against Essendon, Bulldogs were varied, but a lot of their transition on the wing were just stopped by a higher pressing Geelong, able to get, again, like that between the arcs turnovers. And I'll mention a few players that could do that. But on the flip side, the Bulldogs would just not give up. And they were so creative with the attack they were able to find. A lot of it, I mentioned it a few weeks. The Bulldogs just have so many ways of getting goals, and it's not just from their forwards. And really, it started all in the middle. Leber absolutely beasted that game. 19 clearances, 28 contested possessions. And he was
He had
supported by the
10 clearances by halftime.
Yeah, I was ridiculous. And, and honestly, the Bont really didn't have that. Like, if you're giving best midfielders, it's 1, 2, 3, Libba, Bont, Trelaw.
Yeah,
All
I
the
agree.
Bulldogs. And that was just how they got a lot of it. Their fast attack runs in a clearance. They do so much damage. As I said, and when you got a player like Libba, it's not just the center, it's around the ground. He's so good at like getting that nitty-gritty ball, passing it off to a forward. And yeah, so it's like, while the Cats worked all night to limit the amount of spaces the Doggos had, in the general game, it was at the stop play. They really managed to get back into it. As I said, so with that good defensive matchup, as I said, it's always easy to say Stewart, and he really had a good game. De Koning also had a pretty great game. But it was Ames and Bitclaves, like a bit up the ground, making that pressure. It wasn't even the ball going dumped in, because the Bulldogs aren't always a dumping kick. They've got a lot of distributors. So to make that pressure up, I thought was just a really good tactics by Geelong. And the Bulldogs forwards did get some good looks. Ugle Hagen, Darcy, and Waitman all getting solid marks and goals inside 50. So, as I said, when the Bulldogs did have their opportunities, their forwards didn't disappoint. That's why it was such a close game, even though I thought Geelong were pretty controlling, not statistically dominant, but as I said, they just had a lot more pressure in their game plan. But, as I said, it was just the difference between them was, as I said, those turnovers that the Bulldogs had trying to advance the ball, again, by either dumping between the arcs or just spending a bit too much time with the ball from waiting for something to open. I wouldn't put it on them. Honestly, the Bulldogs played a fantastic game as well. It's just, I think Geelong were on that next level, and I think the Bulldogs just did really well to keep up with them. And I do want to mention, because I mentioned a lot about Geelong's defence, but Geelong's attack for the first 4 rounds, very wide and very deep, but they've been converting really easily. And I know they're not the most accurate team in the comp. They're playing a very modern style of dominating by the amount more than some of the specifics.
So Geelong have always liked to dominate by stoppage.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm talking, like from those stoppages inside the 50, as I said, you could say it's luck, as I said, Jeremy Cameron, getting so many like wide shots and some of the ridiculous snaps you see. But I think it's a lot more than that. I think it's a very craftily structured attack, and it's trying to create this sort of undefensible defense by just mixing it up so much. Because when you look at it, the players that are getting the ball from like high on the boundary, like Jeremy Cameron, Tom Hawkins, and occasionally one of the distributors. And the thing about that is when it goes to Hawkins or Jeremy Cameron, you still got to watch out because they will take some of the, shots themselves and, but they're also very willing to dish off to some of the small forwards. And it's just one of those things where you think, when you see teams that go boundary side, some of the things is so predictable.
Yep.
But I think Geelong are just one of those teams. And, like you see so many score involvements by Jeremy Cameron and, Tom Hawkins. and it's because they get the ball, they're dishing it off occasionally to Close and Grime Myers. He had a fantastic game,
Yep.
but they're not afraid to take it themselves, and it just keeps the defenders questioning. It's like, well, do you have to keep them more honest by always following closely on the sides? But when they do that, they kick it to bloody Oliver Dempsey, and Max Holmes occasionally pushes up, and they win by speed. It's just so
right.
varied. And it's just, it's honestly, I think it's one of the best attacks to watch. Even though, as I said, they're not, a lot of the games, I think they've kicked more behinds than goals. But, when you see the qualities of the opportunities that they're able to create, and honestly, a couple of that is just a couple of years into Ollie Dempsey as well, who's been fantastic marking presence. Like, you can't do some of that stuff, sending Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron without the marking threat of Dempsey. And to put so much faith into him, taking a best defender, because not always, a good defender's always going to stay deep. They're not always going to follow them up the field. So, just an absolutely fantastic attack that the Bulldogs, and I think their defense were okay-ish. Obviously, they're not as structurally solid. They're still young.
Their defense is probably their weakest point at the moment.
Yeah, but I think it actually is building. And one of the people, Piku Kamas, I
thought he had a great game.
Pretty great game. And as I said, it's just his ability from going to a defender that's, you put down there, get a few intercepts, and, just as that +1 to actually a bit more threatening one-on-one. Like, he's not just winning the ball because it's loose, he's winning the ball because he's winning contests.
Yeah.
And he's just playing smart. And I think that really will help the Bulldogs going forward, even though I don't think they're, it's solid enough. Jones still performing well. Johannesson still, providing distribution, and obviously Ed Richards came back this game. Like, nothing really to cry about for them. It's just the Bulldogs had a really good game, but just beaten by what I think is some of the best football I've seen this year. Because, it's not always been the best for Geelong. They had a very scrappy game against St Kilda. But I think this game was just one that was an absolute treat to watch. You can tell by me, rambling on. So, on the limelight, so many players here. Not many people had a bad game. Libba, Bont, Treloar, absolutely fantastic. Young Sam Darcy, an option in forward. He's absolutely presenting well. Brian Myers, Stengel, small forward threats. Tom Stewart, De Koning, deep threats. Deep back threats for Geelong, who played their role fantastically. Jeremy Cameron, again, another game for him, over 10 score involvements. And as I said, shout outs to Jones, who I thought played a pretty good game. The Rileys, both Riley West and Riley Sanders for the Bulldogs. A lot of good young blood for them coming up. Even if I think it was Sanders ran the wrong way.
I think it was.
It's one way to avoid that dump kick turnover. You just break the line the other way, see if you can catch them off guard.
And then you just create your own space.
Exactly. Holmes, I mentioned before. Guthrie had another great game. And Jack Bowes coming, he had to spend a bit more time in the middle. And I thought he did quite well. As I said, obviously it's a bit awkward. He'll be a bit maligned for Geelong, probably for the wrong reasons. Like, he didn't write his own contract. But, he was very handy for them, I thought. And just overall, even though obviously Geelong they were fairly all right in the middle. Like, obviously, I think the Bulldogs were more damaging when they won their clearances. But, as I said, Guthrie and Bowes still provided a bit for them. So, just really good game of football. Honestly, like, I thought the Port Melbourne game was a treat to watch last week, even if it didn't have the right result. This game will probably be one of my favourites for the year.
whilst we're still on this game, I am going to make a quick mention to the rising star for the week,
Oh, okay.
who is Sam Darcy. And my God, he really does look like Luke Darcy after
Yeah.
all. Oh my God. Um, so
Yeah, for
he
sure.
so he had a total of 12 touches, 4 tackles, 8 hitouts, and 5 score involvements
Yeah.
in only 55% time on the ground.
Yeah.
And that's
Like his presence was felt. It was just, oh,
he's going to be so very important for them in the long run.
yeah. And it's like, and obviously the comparison, well, not comparison, but he's going to get, um, obviously he's got Lob nipping at his heels, theoretically, but,
Mm.
Lob's just one of those players that, again, he disappears.
He doesn't
And,
have enough consistency.
exactly, but like as someone who's watched most of the Freo games when he was there, like he is an absolute matchman. I think people forget that about Lob. But if Sam Darcy is able to do that, again, with 55 minutes of game time, um, as I said, you just play him. And I said that last week, but and the fact is, like, Lob, if Sam Darcy, hope he doesn't, ever goes down, or another one of the Bulldogs forwards, they've
Hopefully
got a
not.
very reasonable replacement.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
You, like I said, he's a bit maligned, but I still think Lob's generally probably not the last few games he's played, but he's still a net positive for the Bulldogs. But yeah, as I said, it's very hard to match up on, very athletic. Yeah, it's just I don't think he reads the play that well, to be honest. Like he just when he dominates, it's just because normally he's just athletically outdoing his opponents.
Hmm.
But obviously the flip side to that, when you got defenders that can match up on you pretty well, it gets a bit hard on you. So obviously never really developed that part of his game, and Sam Darcy continues. He'll be holding his spot for a long time to come, even if Lob does well in the VFL.
I don't know if we mentioned it last week. I cannot remember if we mentioned it last week. But other
I think I more just mentioned Darcy.
yeah, probably. But other young bulldog, Harvey Gallagher, won the Rising
Oh
Star
yeah.
last week. So that's 2 in a row for
Okay.
the doggies so far. And
Oh,
it's
sorry. Yeah, you meant if you mentioned the Rising Star
yeah,
last
yeah.
week.
So
Yeah.
so in total, it's been Matt Roberts from Sydney, Ollie Dempsey from Geelong, George Wardlaw from North Melbourne, and then Harvey Gallagher and Sam Darcy so far in the tally.
Yeah, old people with fantastic games. And yeah, we didn't mention it because obviously we had the Monday podcast. The games were done by them. So,
Yeah, so I don't
yeah,
think it
props
was
to
tallied
Harvey
up then.
Gallagher. Yeah,
All right,
I think we did
shall
mention him in the wrap up.
might have. All right, shall we
Yeah.
then move on to Fremantle and Carlton, the
Yep.
controversial game of the week?
It was as close as the Bulldogs game. Not as fun to watch.
I agree. So the scoreline is 9-9-63 to 10-13-73. It was a controversial finish. I'm sure everyone's kind of talked about it to death at this point. But it gave Carlton their first ever win at Adelaide Oval, something they were never able to do against the Crows or Port Adelaide. Um, I'm going to start by talking about Freo. They were clear leaders in the disposal count with 7 players over 25 touches. Andrew Brayshaw leading the pack with 38 touches, 7 tackles, 4 clearances, 6 inside 50s, and 3 score involvements. I thought he was really, really good this week.
Yeah, I think honestly though, I think he could have been a lot cleaner.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
agree. I don't think
especially going
his
forward.
efficiency was very good.
No, and obviously sometimes you just have those games, and obviously some of the other you'll get to them. Hayden Young,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm about to
supporting
mention
him.
Young.
Yeah, as I said, when you got other players that can pick it up, though, and I'll let you go ahead from there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
as we just mentioned,
Done.
Hayden Young, I thought he was also a standout this week. 25 touches, 9 tackles, 6 clearances, and 7 score involvements. I believe his efficiency was a lot higher as well. So
80%.
yeah, there you go. So it kind of proves that he's like let's compare him to Caleb Sarong for a second. They're both forces to be reckoned with when they're on.
Very different. Like Caleb Sorong's more that bull hard nut player. Again, what I said, like getting that Toure running.
Yeah,
Um,
Sarong's an in,
yeah,
Young's an out, but they both they are very
yeah,
dangerous when they're on.
exactly.
Um, touch on Jacob Wiedering. I believe he came back last week for Carlton, but another strong performance from him this week. 21 touches, 5 tackles, 7 intercept possessions across half back. I believe he had a couple of score involvements as well, which are from their chains going up from coast to coast. Overall,
and he prevented another Matt Taberner masterclass.
you got to always shut down Taberner. You never know what he's going to come up with.
Oh, he's got minutes of good games left in him.
But overall, this was a really, really entertaining game to watch. It's really hard to kind of nitpick very specific moments.
It was one of those things where, as I said, you look at the scoreline, and it's like, and you look at some of the stats. It was a very high turnover game, and you think, oh, maybe it was just these two teams not playing their best. But I think it was just they were so well set up defensively.
There was just a lot of
Freo,
unforced errors in the midfield.
Yeah, it was unforced errors, and especially Fremantle going forward. And that's where I sort of say Brayshaw could have been a bit better, because a lot of his inside 50s, they were dropping forward at the forward targets. And, from what was still good movement, really could have given Freo that extra bit of oomph to, get across the line. As I said, we're going to talk about the decision, but I don't want to be one of those people like, oh, you should always be a few goals above your opponents to prevent umpire errors, because that's just not how football works. Sometimes you just get contests like this and there's mistakes. But, when you're looking, Free Monday, old Jung Lonmai has to do, he's not going to look at the umpiring thing. He's going to look at all those tiny things. And I think it starts with a lot of their entries inside 50s not quite giving their forwards enough to work with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought, Carlton's midfield did look really, really good, as it always does.
Yeah.
I thought Kerno had a really good game, Mr. Charlie Kerno. Harry Mackay, I thought, had a weaker game this week. I thought he was shut down really well.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, again, you're talking like the two best forwards against probably the best defending duo in Luke Ryan and Alex Pearce. So I thought overall they got enough. Obviously, it was mainly through Charlie, but, as I said, I'd say a lot of Carlton's attack were a bit more opportunistic than Freo. He had the more conventional game plan set up, but as I said, when you weren't executing, it was just, left a few points on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like Carlton were just letting him score. Like, a lot of that pressure was from good defense. But
yeah, like you said, a very high turnover game.
Yeah, it forced Freo to, take those more central options, more toward the 50-meter arc, and it generated a lot of turnovers.
Yeah. Do we want to touch on it? We don't have to. It's kind of.
I think we can talk about it, because I think it's just. I think overall, it's interesting how people perceive games, because obviously the thing was.
Hindsight is always 20/20, right?
You don't have to. We don't have to go through exactly. Obviously it was. What was it? It was. It was
a touch kick. It was a touch goal by Carlton that was not seen as a touch goal by the umpires. There was dissent from Freo because someone said something the umpire didn't properly understand and thought it was aimed directly at him.
Yeah.
And paid dissent for
it. And it said, oh, well, it wasn't paid at him. Jordan Clark was mouthing off for a whole minute, generally directed towards the umpire. You could see why he paid it. I don't have a problem with that.
And then, that ended up resulting in 2 goals, and Freo didn't have enough time to get back up.
And I only really want to mention this because of a lot of the conversation that I think's come out of this. Like, obviously, if you're a Freo fan, be upset. Like, it sucks. Like, honestly, they should have won that.
Absolutely.
And it's like, it's like in these 50 games, sometimes dumb luck is the only thing that really separates it. Because again, it's not like any of these teams really had like, the paper says, oh, the game was robbed by Freo, but really, if any of those teams ended up winning, you wouldn't really shrug an eyebrow. You know what I mean? Like, they both had their opportunities, and as I said, very unfortunate that that level of umpiring decision led to it, but it happens. But it's just some of the commentary, like, first of all, about the umpiring, and first of all, the conspiracy, which is just absolutely ridiculous, saying, oh, they gifted Carlton the game, and it's like, Freo got 6 of their goals from umpiring decisions.
Right.
If they, like, and I'm not saying that they weren't there. I actually thought a lot of those, like, of all the umpiring decisions, it's more what wasn't paid that I had a problem with what was paid.
That's usually the issue that most people have with umpires, is that there are very obvious free kicks there for both sides, and like across the entire competition, that just don't get
this
seen.
Was like, and this game, I think it was like 16 free kicks to 12 in favor of Freo.
And I'll play a little bit of bias into this. Throughout our premiership run, specifically, or let's say late 2016 onwards, we have always been at the bottom of the free kick differential. Part of that is due to our game style going through the premiership years. We were high attack, high speed, high turnover. Like we were a fast tackling team. We were always bound to get a lot of high contacts, that sort of thing.
When you go hard, you just obviously get high contacts.
We had a habit of over infringing. Like you can watch a lot of our replays and you'll see it very frequently, but there were also a lot of decisions that were never paid for us, and it's why we're always stuck at the bottom.
It's always the worst when,
it's just kind of a meme that we've kind of always had in the Richmond community.
It's like, some game styles is like really is influenced by how umpires tend to officiate the match. And as I said, I'll get this a bit on further, and it'll get to my point. But as I said, so the Dockers. So if it was a conspiracy, it's like, why would they pay 6 free kicks to the Dockers in front of goals? Which, as I said, I think one was a bit harsh. I think it was Jai Amos got a chopping that I thought was actually probably just good defense. But, so as I said, feels like an arguable one there. But, it's, so as I said, so it's obviously not a conspiracy. And then they're like, and then they go for the umpire's call. Sorry, not umpire's call, captain's call.
Yeah.
But the captain's call would never have made it to that level of game. Like, you're going to use it. Make sure you use it in any situation instead of lose it.
Yeah.
And it's just like you say, oh, you should be able to stop the game and get that call. And then in the next game, when Geelong took that mark, on the behind line, and there was criticizing
the Radicalea mark.
No, not Radicalea. Geelong. It was I know you probably Stengel.
Oh yes, okay, yeah, I know which one.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, but he played on from the goal square, so you wouldn't want to call it back. So on one side, you got fans wanting, play to just go on as normal. And yet they're still wanting like an umpire's call that, can be put at any time, stop play, and it would just be a mess.
And granted, we have third umpires to be able to watch. Like, the whole point of a third umpire is to review every goal and every behind to make sure it's clear, right? Well, granted, that's not always going to be directly sent to the ground umpires, but that's meant to be how it's meant to work.
When you can take the time to do it, sure.
Yeah, like, especially for games going quick, they don't always have, as far as I'm aware, they don't always have enough time to be able to tell the umpires on the ground, hey, stop play, we need to review this properly, that sort of thing. But there are moments, especially such as this one, where, it was touched off the arm. All the Freo players in that area called it touched off the arm, and no one looked at it until it was too late. That's the sort of thing where you want the third umpire to say, hey, hold on a second, give us a moment.
Yeah, and I can see the merit in it, but then, as I said, it just comes in what counts as a fast play, and you'll just get teams that, when they get that, they'll just play on quicker. You know what I mean?
Especially when you're running out of time, which is what
exactly
ended up happening anyway.
Cultural would have just found a way to quickly snap it if that rule was in place, and then there'll be controversy about players trying to metagame it And as I said,
Players already try
I
and
think
metagame the competition.
exactly. And it's one of those things, it's so rare to have that situation. Like the amount of bad luck with because it says, oh, how did four umpires miss it? Like, okay, like it was obvious like the angle for it. It was a lot harder to see on the side.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you're umpiring, you're not directly above or below the play. So the two forward umpires, they were more on the angle. You would not expect them to see it. So it's like, so you got two umpires that should have seen it. You would have hoped that the umpire more directly behind would have saw it. They didn't.
Plus, it also
The other
depends on
umpire
whether the
on a bit of an
umpires are
angle.
close to the contest or they're
Exactly.
sitting further back. Like,
Yeah.
they're not like, yeah, we
And
all admit, human error. They're not always going to see everything,
yeah.
but sometimes there are things that just are a little bit too obvious.
Yeah, but honestly, like, obviously it was bad, but it wasn't all four umpires.
No,
Like,
no,
two
it
umpires
just
were
happens.
only in position to see that. And yeah, it was just very unfortunate. Like, obviously it was a howler. There's no mistaking that. But, as I said, and it's one of those things that I think as humans, and this going a bit into science, your brain does so good a job at correcting things
Yeah, it does.
visually. And when you look at it, as I said, when you see the deviation and it's touch, because obviously on live you didn't see it much, but then you see the players go touch. So when you're looking at that perspective, it's not, is this just a normal play? And your brain just corrects it. You're looking for the deviation and it's
Yeah,
easier to spot. And honestly, when you're umpiring, like these are people that are trained not to see this, and obviously they didn't get it. But for other people saying, "Oh, sack the umpires off these one incidents," it just go umpire a game. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like at the
Like,
very worst, you're right, and you're going to be like one of the best umpires in the league and actually officiate correctly.
imagine.
But at the worst, you're just providing abuse, and it makes worse decisions. Because one of the worst things about that game is I thought they weren't making calls when they could have, and all this umpire centralization, all these highlighted things is just going to make umpires, go for the option where they're not making the mistake. Like they're not going to give it
Yeah, here's
where like
like the other
they'll
issue
just go
is
into the gray area.
yeah, we don't want an over officiated game, but we also don't
Yeah,
want an under officiated game. Like, yeah, there's nothing
exactly.
wrong
And
with
it's,
just letting them play, but you need to be able to,
yeah,
call when free kicks are there.
exactly. And honestly, there's games where I think, umpires, really need to review what's going on. And there's, obviously been some errors that have really not been thought through. But of all the controversial umpire games, like this is just, I would say, a slightly badly officiated game,
Hmm.
just turned into a farce by media commentary. And I think you just got to pull your head in a bit. Like honestly, it was bad. Again, Freo fans complain for the week, but also you're not playing that badly. Sometimes in those 50-50 games, things just don't go your way. But, Freo's a side where, they can, uh, I think they're genuinely, I don't think they'll make top four, but they can definitely compete against the top four.
Hmm.
And yeah, as I said, they've got a lot to look forward to, and it sucks. But yeah, there's a lot of good things from it. And just a positive note, because I don't know if we're going to move on directly after that. How good was Jeremy Sharp's game?
Oh, big
Absolutely
agree.
fantastic on the wing.
Yeah, let's actually talk
Um,
about the players more than the
yeah,
umpires.
exactly. And it was just like, it was bubbling away for him to have a good game because he was in around the contest. But yeah, that was just a terrific performance. Uh, very good distribution. Very clutch goal.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I do want to quickly mention the injury. There was only one, and it was sadly to Michael Frederick. He
Yeah.
pulled a hammy. Be out for a couple
Mm,
weeks, it looks like, but
yeah.
hopefully not too bad.
I think the most, yeah, and I think the most damaging thing for Freo is just, I don't think he converts that well, but just having that speedy option again, like even when he's not firing, it's hard to defend. He keeps defenders honest. I think
He
he'll grow into a very
and he's one of
serviceable
those live
player.
wire players that fans
Yeah,
love to watch as well.
exactly. You love to see him play. He doesn't need many disposals to have an impact. It's just, yeah, as I said, honestly, you hope he learns to be a bit more selective. I think sometimes he could pass off more than spraying
Mm.
shots on goals. But at the same time, the thing that makes him such a live wire just means that that's just part of his game. I said, I don't think it's going to be like a player that, has to turn into a fantastic distributor. It's just if he can be a bit better,
Yeah.
it'll make his game a lot better. And yeah, as I said, hopefully he comes back and provides that excitement for Freo.
Yeah, I agree. Which game do you want to touch on next? Because
What game do I have?
you've got
The GWS.
you've got the Clash. Oh,
So yeah, it's
the
either
Clash of the
the
expansion teams.
expansion clash or we go over some of the other games.
No,
I think we just
we'll go into
go through
this.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, back-to-back games that were pretty fun to watch. Obviously, like the West Coast game, this game blew out at the very end. But for a lot of it, the Gold Coast were actually pretty dominant.
It was
for much of the game.
it was pretty even across the board for a while there.
Yeah.
As well.
And I said, like, the final stats ended up even, but I think it was really just because GWS had a dominant final term. But yeah, as I said, so again, after the insipid performance against the Bulldogs, you're sort of questioning, how will Gold Coast, again, a very streaky team, come up against, the informed Giants? But I think, if anything, the Giants were really the team that were lax because they sort of just let the Coasters do what they really wanted to do. In what was a very uncontested game of football, I don't think the tackle count was very high. But, as I said, it was just, a game that was played on the wings, working the ball up slowly and just, again, getting what they were wanting to do. GWS, obviously, very late wrestle control. I should say the scoreline, 13-11-89, 18-9, 117. I get excited by football. I jump into it a bit much.
I know,
so sorry,
I know.
viewers,
It's all good.
But yeah, as I said, so when Gold Coast had possession, it was a lot of very good movement, starting from halfback, which were absolutely fantastic. Closey, their person on debut, absolutely, one of the top players of the game. Andrews and Flanders also very strong on distribution. But unfortunately, at the same time, while they were generating a lot of run off halfback, they were defending quite well one-on-one. It was sort of their Achilles heel at the at the same time, because there was a lot of turnovers, and it's what kept the Giants into the game for most of it. From their half-back line, just made it a bit too easy for them. Like the Giants didn't really have their setup game. It wasn't really set up until that last quarter. Obviously, Hogan was pretty great for the whole game. So many marks inside 50. He had 6 marks inside 50.
5
the
goals
entire
came
Gold
from a
Coast
lot
team
of
had
those.
8. Yeah, exactly. I think as I said, GWS obviously were very accurate, and Gold Coast didn't quite convert. So it was just a bit of a shame, because I think Gold Coast had a very wide range of performance that match, and yeah, as I said, it just didn't quite go their way. But it was just very good to see structurally after that disappointing game. Hardwick obviously probably put him into line. But I think the biggest thing that Gold Coast had a headache, was that forward line. Took a bit to get going, and it was all at different times, but all of Green, Hogan, and Brown looked threatening in their defensive matchups. If the ball wasn't intercepted in their backline, it felt like it was going to be guaranteed a goal. One of the best interceptors was, of course, Mac Andrews, who, even though he did have a couple of turnovers,
he had a brilliant game, though, otherwise.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And that's another thing. Absolute credit to Hardwick. As I said, he had those couple of turnovers, but he just kept on going. And it's very hard sometimes, especially with younger players, to have them keep on going after a few errors. But he was always backing himself in. He was positioned fantastically, especially for a player that's not, second year in the competition. To be in those positions, I thought were really good. And yeah, also a lot of the younger kids. Jed Walter in his first game had a nice goal. I think, and he was matched up against Buckley. And honestly, Obviously it wasn't a terrific game by him, but for a young kid who had every right to be shut down on that matchup, he presented okay.
One thing I want to quickly note is that going into this game, Hardwick, no, I'd rather just call him Dimmer. That's kind of what I know him as.
Yeah, go for it.
Dimmer made 7 changes to this
Yes.
the starting 22 going into this week. I think 1 or 2 of them
And
were from
honestly,
injuries, and then like 3 players were debutants. And
I don't actually think there was. I think it was all omitted / managed.
I don't entirely remember. But
Yeah.
anyway, it was 7 massive changes. And the fact that they still managed to keep GWS on their toes is very impressive.
Yeah, and it was cohesive. And that's good. Sometimes, on the secondary levels, depending on how good your setup is, in the club, sometimes you get players that look all right, but they're sort of just playing their own sort of game rather than meshing, so to speak, in the club. And especially with Gold Coast, we have a lot of younger, talent that, might bob in and out of the team depending on how the bottom half is going. But as I said, and the other two, Graham, he provided a lot of inside pressure. GWS still did pretty good in the clearances. But I thought Graham was probably actually got a lot of the best disposals because Rao was obviously fantastic. Another game where he just dominated the grittier possessions. But yeah, I thought Graham was actually, provided a bit of toughness when it wasn't Rao, which he can hold his head up high. And as I mentioned before, Closey, honestly a fantastic game. Got a cheeky goal as well. Love to see it. And
good on him.
Honestly, one of the better debuts. And, as I said, I know Sam Darcy. If it wasn't for the fact that Sam Darcy had a really fantastic game, I would have had him as the best debutant. But I don't think it was very controversial it going to Darcy in the end.
No, I don't think so.
So in the spotlight, you had both Greens were very good. Caniglio, again, GWS.
Mm-hmm.
It took a bit, but they ended up getting a lot of attack from their midfield, as they always do. Hogan, obviously, one of the best attackers for GWS and continuing his fantastic form. Rao, Flanders, Andrews, no surprise there. All good. Closey, as said, in the limelight in his debut, fantastic. Lukosius, he was forced in the half-back line, still fitted well. As I said, he's damaging up forward, and it is very hard to swing back and forward, when you are that useful. But, as I said, it is really good if he can just play when needed. And for GWS, Brent Daniels was very good. And Callaghan, I thought, had a very good game.
I do just want to quickly mention whilst we're on Hogan. He is currently leading the Coleman medal tally with 16 goals, with Bailey Fritsch behind him at 14. Charlie Curnow rounding out the top 3 with 13 goals.
Yeah, GWS do have that 1 game advantage though?
Yes, because of the opening round. But Melbourne also played...
No, they've had their bye though.
Yeah, they did have their bye. Yeah, so it's all kind of balanced out for them now.
Yeah, it's too hard. But yeah, we'll go.
There's only 4 teams left to do a bye, and that's Collingwood, Sydney, which are this week, and then Richmond, Melbourne, which are next week.
Yeah, so it's Fritsch that needs to.
Yeah. Shall we move on to Richmond, St Kilda?
Yes.
So, I kind of really don't want to talk about this game because we were terrible in the second half. But I'm going to because we looked great in the first half. So the scoreline was 9-6-60 to 9-13-67. Again, we put the heat on early. Like, St Kilda only scored 1 goal in the first half, whereas we scored, I think 7-ish, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they just kept us to like 1 something in the second half, which was pretty demoralizing. They came back really, really hard. Jack Steele and Jack Sinclair leading from the front as they normally do. 33 and 29 touches apiece, 12 clearances combined. Steele also led the tackle count with 10 tackles, 6 inside 50s, 7 score involvements. I think he was probably their best on ground yet again. He is incredible to watch. He is an incredible asset for St Kilda to have, and Him and Sinclair are pretty much their driving forces going into
Yeah.
the later half of the season. The greatest of all time, Mr. Dustin Martin. I am not going to get into any arguments about contesting that. Well, if he plays for one more, if he plays for one more
You can
year,
get away with it this week.
if he plays for one more year, then maybe we can get into it, because I feel like if he extends his career out by one more year, it might tarnish the reputation a little bit. Anyway, I
No
thought
one talks about Michael Jordan on the Wizards. He's fine.
I thought he was one of our best, considering he didn't play last week. He looked really, really fresh, really, really consistent, going through the midfield and pushing up forward as he normally does. He might not have made an impact directly on the scoreboard, but he finished with 30 touches, 6 into 50s, and 4 score involvements. I believe he laid 3 important tackles as well, and I think he got free kicks for them off the top of my head. Shea Bolton, looking lively, considering we didn't really have a forward line. Scored 4-1 from 19 touches, 4 tackles, and 8 score involvements.
Should have been 5-1. He had that weird.
Absolutely. It was very unlucky that he didn't kick that. Jacob Kazitsky, I want to highlight briefly, because he scored his first goal with us. Good on him. Hopefully, I thought actually overall he did look pretty good. It was just, again, this week was a lot of midfield pressure coming from both sides, and there was they forced a lot of turnovers on us, which, normally not how we operate. Normally we're the ones that get the turnovers. But
and I got to ask,
St Kilda looked incredible. In the end.
Marketti Lafau, was that his first goal?
No, he scored his first goal in his against Sydney, I believe. He scored 2 goals against Sydney.
He's one of those players where I don't think he would be playing if they didn't have so much, forward line.
Well, he kind of came in,
but
he kind of came in as a similar replacement to Prestia initially, but then he ended up being able to push up forward because of our
that's what
frontline
I'm saying.
issues.
It's like he doesn't seem like a natural forward, but I think he's just doing enough on the pressure. And as I said, he may not get really good stats, but I do think he's actually quite useful there. Considering
we picked, he's 25, because we picked him up in the supplemental period, and I thought, for a somewhat mature age recruit coming from a different code, because he was originally meant to be like an NRL prospect.
Yeah, he doesn't look like it. He's got the name for it as well.
He looks really, really mature at AFL level. He just probably needs a little bit more game time. But from what we've seen, he looks.
You rate him over Israel Folau?
No. We're not going down that route.
Miles ahead.
I don't really have any other key important player highlights for either teams, but I just think it was a really high, again, another high turnover game. As I would say a non-biased sort of viewer, an impartial viewer, it probably would have been a really good game to watch, as per a lot of the games so far this week. It's probably on the lesser side out of Port Melbourne, like Doggies Cats and games like that. But
honestly, again, you just like seeing Richmond so lively, but at the same time,
you don't want to see them lose.
I think the Saints have just played they've got a couple of wins that they need to get, but they're just playing a bit.
They probably would have
played a clean game.
I don't think they wanted what happened to them last week against Essendon to happen to them this week against us. So Ross Lyon probably would have gotten into them about that.
I think St Kilda's record's fine. I don't think there's too much alarm bells going off. It's just, you like to see him a bit cleaner.
Yeah, their issue is consistency.
Yeah. They've got the forward line that's just a bit meh.
It's similar to what I said last week, is that Essendon and St Kilda are probably the primary 2 teams in the competition that are really hard to kind of put your faith in, because they're so inconsistent.
Yeah.
They're too middle of the pack.
St Kilda, I rate St Kilda higher, and I just think defensively they're pretty solid. I think that goes a bit understated. And as you said, it's not just because of Cam Wilkie and Zane Cordy, who I think going really under the radar this season.
I agree.
Yeah, it's the ability to pass it off to distributors like Jack Sinclair
Brad
and
Hill.
Wangene Milera.
Yeah.
Who just get the ball forward so quickly. It's normally to an advantageous position. It's not just the long dumping kick that gets turnover. It's space for forward players to run forward to.
Yep.
And yeah, so if they could convert a bit more of that or find a way to get that set up a bit more consistently, I just like to see a complete game from them because I do think they've got, the essence of a good football team. It's really hard to see the complete package from them from whatever they've shown this season.
I will touch on injuries before we wrap this game up. Thompson Dow, he rolled his ankle during the second quarter. He managed to come back out and play most of the game. I think he played up to halfway through the third before being subbed off, which brought in our debutant, Kane McAuliffe, who's putting up phenomenal numbers in the VFL. Unlucky for him, in front of all of his family and his friends, he also did an ankle. I don't think his was too bad. I think it was just another roll. He'll be fine during the week.
Should be.
Probably won't play this week against West Coast. I would assume they might just take it easy on him. And then he'll get the bye as well, the rest up. And they might bring him back. They might bring him back against Melbourne, which would be pretty good to see.
Yeah. It's either they rest him or McAuliffe's the sub again.
There's not really much for else to talk about. I think our young list looks really good. It's just about, cleaning up and learning from mistakes and just slowly improving over time.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Do you want to quickly just touch on Hawthorn and Collingwood?
Yes, and I'm just going to pose one question to you. I did kind of mention this to you yesterday. Yeah. But is Collingwood in finals contention right now? Because going off of that second half, they are nowhere near the top 8. They did not deserve to win that game.
It's hard to rule them out. I think what you got to look at again is, especially when you got a team that's doing so differently 2 years, it's what's similar and what's different, because as I said, their forward line issues, they sort of did have last year. It just wasn't as emphasized. They've got moving parts that haven't done mesh quite as well this year. Obviously, Myercheck, he hasn't had brilliant last year. It's been a bit, down. So, you shrug your shoulders. That's whatever. I think it's just the back line, and it's just... And honestly, I looked at it, and it's hard because I only looked at the highlights, but, it wasn't really, I
watched a little bit of the second half, which is kind of why I'm digging into this.
It just wasn't Collingwood-like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they were completely shut down.
As I said, I can forgive, the inaccuracy in the last quarter that almost... the game. Yeah, exactly. But it's just the turnovers and, it's just, as I said, and even like I said, because a lot of their score was off Hawthorn's own turnovers, but they were giving the ball back themselves. And as I said, it's just very uncharacteristic. Honestly, I know we've made the meme about him, but he's honestly been Collingwood's best defender for the last 2 weeks, as far as I've looked at.
Coast legend Billy Frampton.
Exactly. And it's it's just so weird. Maynard had a few turnovers that cost him a goal. I think I saw, what's his name? Aquina. I think of...
McCreary?
Schultz? No.
Who else is on their team?
No, blonde-haired captain.
Oh, Darcy Moore?
His name. Darcy, I think, had a turnover leading to a goal. And it's just stuff you wouldn't expect, and especially against Hawthorn, who isn't exactly a high-pressure team.
No, they're a team that is still finding their footing.
Exactly. And as I said, I think it's just, it's going to be... honestly, the fact they scored 11-11 against a pretty dismal back line, as I said. So again, you just expect them to score 50 odd points every week. And if their defense can't defend, shut down teams anymore, it's very hard to see them getting back in. But,
Yeah.
I could also see them improving that. It's just, we need to see it.
I know we've kind of already mentioned all the stats to you about this, but I just want to put into perspective for everyone else who hasn't really looked at this game. But in the last quarter, Hawthorn kicked 4-1, Collingwood kicked 0-5. Across that entire second half, Hawthorn kicked 8-4, and Collingwood only kicked 2-7.
Yeah.
Which kind of showed, well, one, Collingwood were massively inaccurate, and it nearly cost them the game. But I think Hawthorn just learned from their mistakes. And the move, and granted, this was a move done out of necessity, because Hawthorn kind of lost their forwards. They don't really have a forward line at the moment. But
yeah,
Blake Hardwick, he was initially recruited to Hawthorn as a forward. But because of the fact that at the time they didn't really have any backline, he was trained as a defender. And that's where he's been for most of his AFL career. Sam Mitchell finally got to put him into the forward line, as he was initially promised when he was recruited. And he kicked 3 goals out of it.
Yeah. 4.
Oh, yeah, it was 4. Actually, you are correct.
4 goals on, yeah. I got the stats in front of me. I didn't watch it.
I thought I only saw 3 when I was looking at it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, Dylan Moore scored
point
3.
is, Hawthorn do have the right pieces to be able to be damaging and to be able to make an impact against stronger teams. Granted, Collingwood 50-50 in terms of them being an actual stronger team right now. They're going through some stuff. But they are also the reigning premiers, which is why it's an argument to be made, right?
Exactly. And as I said, like, Hawthorn, look, as I said, I'm loving to see some of these changes, as you've mentioned. Obviously, with the flip side of that is they moved Max Ramsden back. He obviously had a very good, nice opening goal, but switched to the back line. I'm assuming it was like a swap between those two.
I'm pretty sure Hardwick started back line and then moved up forward.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is Hardwick swap with Max Ramsden.
Yeah, I think that's what the plan was.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, it's just, it was a bit different. I saw it was a bit more contested than what Hawthorn normally are. And as I said, it's all going towards building that identity. Again, you got to get those wins when you can. But if you don't, you got to make sure you get around the kids and say, hey, this is how we can win games of football. Let's try and bring this effort in every week and make sure the games, there's enough games where we are competitive and we can get that win.
Yeah.
And, which it'll be good to see from Hawthorn.
Yeah.
As I said, I really think they'll be a back half of the team here. I think they'll benefit when, you say games get a bit more contested.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know this game was kind of advertised as the Jack Ginnivan sort of game because he was up against his old side who he just won, the premiership with.
Yeah.
But honestly, that didn't bother me at all. Like, I wasn't watching the game for that. I just let him play. If there's freeze there, there's freeze there. If there's not, there's not. It doesn't matter. Yeah, we've kind of already discussed this with the Freo game.
Yeah, it's just, I think a lot of the thing about Ginnivan is just he's a bit of excitement and it's just creative. And I think that's what sort of Hawthorn need because, I said they don't really have the structure for conventional goals.
Yeah, they need that sort of X factor to be able to just come up with something. Overall it'll be good. He'll be up and down. But as I said, you just rate him on, what he can in the games when they're closer. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to MRO reports. In open bracket, suspensions only, close bracket. There's only 2 for this week. Cozzy Pickett out for 1 match for rough conduct against Jake Saligo. I did actually see this. It kind of not really much in it, but I figured you just take the 1 match, take the week off. He gets 2 weeks off because they have to buy the week after. So good for him. He could probably use a break. He's been working pretty hard.
He challenged it.
They are challenging it. That's right. They are challenging it.
Yeah, it's the other one that isn't.
Yes. Lucky Fogarty out for 1 match for striking that 5. That There was definitely
Yeah,
something in
that's
that.
pretty clear cut. Like, it's just one of those things where he's just so lucky he didn't really. Like, it was one of those hits where it did hit high, but it was from chest. So it
Yeah,
was very
but
clumsy.
if you chest punch, it's a weak. Like, or not
Oh, yeah,
like
like, it's a
punch a
weak. And
chest, but like
yeah,
you grab the jumper, it's pretty much a
yeah,
weak.
and it's just like, as I said, I think he'll just be thankful that, such a clumsy spoil attempt didn't do a bit more damage because, that's something where you could, like, as we've been talking about, it's a precedent of 3 weeks if you actually cause damage,
Yeah, and
and he
like
would have been
especially
fully
against Nat
responsible.
5, who is already injury prone and actually in, good condition
You
right now.
gotta
You
you gotta
don't want to
wipe old
ruin him.
Fife more, and yeah, exactly. He's been playing fantastic for Freo. We didn't quite mention it, but I think it should be stated he is, you know, looking good. You're always a bit skeptical from preseason 5, in the rough and tumble of the actual season, but so far so good.
All right, we're gonna do a quick
And I do want to
rundown.
mention
Oh yeah, go on.
Green didn't get suspended for his sling tackle, which I thought was a
I
bit,
don't know. I thought it
you
was
know,
gonna be brought up. Like the
oh
commentators even
yeah,
thought it was gonna be brought up because it looked pretty heavy. But I
and
guess
and it was just for years they said always see action, and you've seen plenty of innocuous tackles get done for it, and yeah, just maybe with all the speculation with
maybe the youngster finally like
marks and
let's
all
let
that.
Toby Green go for a little bit.
I don't really
He's
think it's
probably the
that,
most
but
suspended man in the competition at this point in time.
yeah, it's honestly been better. Like I think him and Sicily, you'll be surprised how clean
Oh
they've actually
yes,
been for the last few years. But oh boy, did they start off like oof.
yeah. Well, he's the
But
whole
yeah, it
reason why some new rules were invented, like the cleats up rule,
exactly.
for example.
So yeah, a bit surprised. Like you really don't want to see a tackle next week and it be compared to the Toby Green one.
No, you
Uh,
don't.
exactly. So I think he was a bit lucky there, but what can you do?
All right, we're gonna do a quick rundown of round 5. We think most of these are probably pretty clear cut, but
Yeah, we'll
we'll go through
gloss
them
over the
anyway.
ones we think are going to be blowouts.
So Melbourne, Brisbane. Honestly, if Brisbane
It'll be
finds some pretty
interesting.
good form, they could push Melbourne pretty hard, but I think Melbourne are just gonna win that anyway.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for Brisbane is, a lot of their attack hasn't been coming off, and against such a good defensive team, um, Melbourne haven't quite dominated the clearances as much. They've been relying a lot on Viney and occasionally Petrarca, but I think they will get enough to just handily beat Brisbane.
Yep, I
I
agree.
can see it being a game where Brisbane's competitive for a chunk, but just sort of always at arm's length, so to speak. But yeah,
Doggies and the Bombers. I think Doggies are pretty clear cut favourites here. Again, Essendon,
yeah, pretty clear cut.
fairly
It's
inconsistent
pretty
as we've
free flowing.
continuously talked about.
Yeah, as I said, they'll definitely if they put that midfield performance like that against Port, they're going to get absolutely hammered.
The Giants and the Saints, again, another pretty clear cut answer. The Giants will clearly win that.
You
They are
think
the best
so?
team in the competition
Um,
right now.
uh, honestly, Geelong do look sexy. I don't want to
I'm not
jump off
gonna lie,
GWS
they
after a
do look
good,
sexy. But
but I
I've
will
got a
still
soft
go
spot
the
for the Giants
Giants.
this year.
Yeah. But I do think it's yeah, the two front runners are now GWS and Geelong since Sydney's had a bad couple of weeks.
Yep. Carlton and the Adelaide Crows at Marvel Stadium. I think again Carlton pretty clear cut favourites here. Adelaide, you just want to hope
Yeah.
and see a little bit of improvement from them, but there's not much
Honestly,
more you can
yeah,
really get.
I think yeah, one thing I will say that'll be interesting, Adelaide's back line, because of their forward line and midfield, it's sort of gone under the radar. So I do actually want to see how they hold up against Charlie Cameron and
Charlie Curnow.
Harry Mackay. What did I say?
Charlie Cameron.
Charlie Mackay. Charlie Cameron. I mean, Adelaide would love to have Charlie Cameron back,
They
but
would. They really would.
yeah, so it'll be interesting to see, like, then they do defend Toll very well, Jordan Butts and Jake Worrell.
I
Yeah.
think that's correct.
Matt Keane as well.
Matt Keane,
Keane
yeah.
as well. Yeah, he had a very good game last match, so I'll be interested to see how that goes. I do think Carlton's going to win, especially with their ability to win the ball out the centre and match up well on the outside.
Yep, I agree. Gold Coast Suns versus Hawthorn. Again, probably another clear-cut favourite for the Suns to win. However, with how Hawthorn kind of matched up yesterday, They could possibly take it to the Suns, at least make it a little bit close.
Yeah. I mean, especially away though. It's just
Yeah, away
I
makes it
would hope
hard.
that Gold Coast are at the level where they are beating teams they should away. Because that's, a part of the consistency that they'll be looking for. But,
Yeah.
I said you can't always assume victories against opponents. And yeah, Hawthorn showed a bit. Hopefully I might have time to. No, I won't be because I'll be watching the Port Freo game. So,
I might
yeah.
catch this one. We'll see how we go for time. I might be busy. Who knows?
Yeah.
And again, Port Freo. I want your primary opinions on this one.
Honestly, it's going to be because I think Freo, the biggest struggle for them is their entries inside 50 this year. While they have won a lot of games, it hasn't been clean. There's been a couple of games. Brisbane, they did pretty well. And North Melbourne, obviously, they're a bit lacking, but they got on the wood. But everything else has just been a bit unclean.
Yep.
And I think Port establishing their game. Like they're going to have to match up very well in the midfield. I'm not going to say it's going to be an easy Port victory because on the flip side, G Sport's going to find it tough. Like it's not going to be, because Port blitz inside 50, and for the most part, they've had enough opportunities up forward. Their one loss against Melbourne, they had a lot of entries and still could find those marking targets, even though Lever had a fantastic game. But I think Ryan and Pierce is going to be a different boat. I think you're going to see a lot of behinds. It might not be a pretty to watch game, but it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes out. Again, I just think from opportunities, it's got to be Port Adelaide, but I really, especially off turnover, Freo could really punish, catch a bit of that high pressing off guard. They've got Jai Amos. Honestly, he hasn't had a big disposal game, but against Port, where you can be very opportunistic with your goals and how smart he is, I reckon he could sneak a cheeky couple of goals against a pretty stout Port defence.
Yeah.
And hopefully have a few players with him, like Michael Walters. Port do struggle a bit against the smaller forwards, so he might get a few crafty goals because it's been pretty lively this year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Geelong and North Melbourne, again, another clear-cut favourite game. However, those are some pretty spicy odds. $12.50 for North to win. It's a very, very.
We don't care. You're losing money if you put money on North. I don't.
No, I do agree. Yeah, Geelong are just gonna dominate that. Especially because it's in Geelong. Like, they're not gonna lose that.
I mean, so you can't say teams aren't gonna lose, but it's so far fetched.
If it was North Melbourne's home game at Marvel, I'd give them a slightly better chance, but it wouldn't be by much. It'd be like an extra 2%.
I mean, you're comparing like 1 in 11 to 1 in 10. It's just like it's not that much difference, really.
It's a Geelong win,
again.
Regardless
It's
of where
competitive.
it's held.
North have had a pretty hard opening fixture again, like West Coast, who we're about to get onto. So I think Geelong just have to play that waiting game. Sorry, not Geelong. North Melbourne have to play that waiting game, get a good matchup, and hopefully see what they're sort of. Again, they're looking just for a bad defensive team that they can sort of outscore. And I don't think Geelong's it. I think they're just going to swallow up some of North's attack.
Yeah.
But North have found way to score like 70 to 90 points against good teams. Hopefully they can do it again.
Yeah, no, I agree. It should be a blowout game for them that will really boost their percentage. But again, we'll see.
Yeah.
West Coast and Richmond. You'd think this would be a clear-cut favourite game, but West Coast played really well for the most part in gather round, and we only looked good for a half.
Yeah, and it's just 2 games in a row where West Coast have been competitively, statistically around the other team, and it's a good chance to get 3 in a row. Like, honestly, I think it's a way to say, this year might actually be better than last year, despite it looking early on like it could be worse. And they have to really provide against a contest. But Richmond, at the same time, their strength is being able to make it hard for the opposition to set up their game. So, even though West Coast are good, they've still got a lot of work to do to make sure Richmond just don't sort of outmuscle them, so to speak, because obviously they're not outmuscling conventionally, but it's more just what Richmond's able to take away from West Coast.
Absolutely agree. I would really like a win. A convincing win would be even better. But again, there is no guarantee considering West Coast's performances over the past 2 weeks.
For sure.
Before
I think it
go on. So.
Yeah. I was going to say, it is one of those games where you hope Richmond's forward line shows something because, again,
we don't have a forward line at the moment. It's like a half forward line.
Yeah. It's not a bad West Coast defense, but it's just vulnerable from constant attack. And if Richmond can provide, it might be a way for some of their forwards to gain a bit of confidence by, wearing down West Coast.
Yeah, especially if we're going to play some younger players still, like McKelty Lafau, for example. It's really good game time for him. And then like young players in the midfield, like Tyler Sonsi, for example, someone who I really hope gets more game time. Tom Brown, who I believe we recruited last season, off the top of my head. He's looked really, really good and really, really mature in the midfield. I hope, honestly, I really hope he gets a Rising Star nomination because I think he really, really deserves it. It's just going to be a matter of time, hopefully.
Yeah.
The 2 buys for this week are Collingwood and Sydney, as I mentioned earlier. But before we wrap up, I want to briefly talk about this thing that I found on Facebook by Useless AFL Stats about David Swallow. He's the only player to have played at 22 AFL verified venues. So I will read the full thing for audio listeners.
Go for it.
David Swallow will become the first AFL player to feature on 22 different grounds since just the 224th game when Gold Coast played GWS at Mount Barker, which, as of recording this, they already have. Those 22 grounds here are those 22 grounds represented as an All-Stars team with Cardinia Park named at full forward. I'm about to show the graphic and we'll explain it all in a minute. In contrast, assuming he plays most games for the rest of the year, Scott Pendlebury will play 400 games at just 11 venues, with over 250 of those games at the MCG. He has never stepped foot on popular venues such as Cardinia Park, because Collingwood never played there, and yet Richmond does. Don't ask me why. York Park, I don't actually know where that is. I think it might be Alice Springs, maybe?
York. I don't think so. I think it's actually a Tasmania ground.
That would make a lot more sense.
I think it's what's called Blundstone.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Manuka Oval, which is Queensland.
Yeah.
So here is the graphic. So we'll start at full back because it's the top of the graphic. We've got Traeger Park, Adelaide Oval, and Bellarive Oval. Then at halfback, we've got the SCG, the Gabba, and Manuka Oval. On the wing, we've got York Park and Optus Stadium. Sorry. In the center, we've got the MCG, greatest stadium in the country. Half forward, we've got Marvel Stadium, Footy Park, and Eureka Park. At full forward, we've got Showgrounds, Cardinia Park, and Kazali Stadium. As the followers, we've got Carrara, which is now People First Stadium. It's Gold Coast Suns' home ground. Orara, which is a rural ground in... Actually, that might be...
Still Tasmania,
yeah. I believe so. And then we've got Subiaco Oval, which are no longer in use, but if there's a gather round in WA, it could come back.
Could be a charity cricket match as well.
Yeah, that's true. And then on the interchange, we have Riverway Park, Norwood Oval, and Mount Barker, which were most recently used for gather round primarily.
Mm-hmm.
And then Xingwan Stadium, aka the China game.
Still undefeated at China.
Yeah.
To remain that way for the rest of the time, maybe. Yeah.
Not David Swallow. He's lost 2 games there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think David Swallow will have too many fond memories of Port Adelaide. One strong one, I think he was playing that game where they got their first victory, but none since. So, yeah. But honestly, again, it's
Good
just
on
a
him.
testament to, again, like these players that stay at some of the fringier clubs, how much effort it goes to, especially when you're getting older. Like, it's so easier to take your final years at a Victorian club,
and it's
and you know,
like if we and
when you're resting your body
yeah, go
and
on.
playing at one stadium, you're not having to fly. It's just so much easier.
Yeah. Whereas
Uh,
you look at David Swallow clearly and other players from interstate clubs and how much they have to
yeah,
travel. It's crazy how much experience they get at how many grounds.
exactly. And it does make you like, on the flip side, it does make you very good in different conditions, like winds, heavy rains, obviously. You know, when you have Etihad with a roof and it's able to close
And
it.
if you're going up to
Um,
Queensland, you have to deal with the humidity.
exactly. And it's just one of those things where, you know, as I said, it really makes you a lot more versatile. But yeah, as I say, it's something I don't think any player would choose. Some like the challenge, and like
Yeah.
especially some travelers. You know, it does forge a bit of your identity. Like, you know, as I said, even this podcast, you know, it's called Coast to Coast because, you know, as I said, generally there is a bit of a Victoria versus outside of Victoria,
Yeah, I agree.
especially
That's
within other states. It is a bit more one-sided. Victoria's only ever think about themselves, so it's hard for them to think about other
well,
states thinking
I'm
about them.
sorry that the entire statistic system is based on the VFL and not like
Yeah,
the waffle.
yeah. Well, where is it? Founded in 1870. Where is it? I don't know. It's probably on the back.
I'm pretty sure
Um,
I have one on mine from when we were founded. I have it somewhere. Um,
yeah, yeah. Nah, it's all good.
before we
But yeah,
briefly wrap this
it's
up, I want to ask
yeah.
you, what are you up to this week?
Again, house sitting. My lovely patient dog who has not barked, despite being fed a bit later than usual. He loves me because I feed him a bit earlier, but the podcast is taking him a bit past his uh feeding time,
He's
and
he's
he's
just
being a very good pup about it.
hanging out and not
Having a little
minding at
lie
all.
down. And I
For
can
me,
actually see if I can.
yeah, there you go. Oh, what a cute pupper.
A famous pupper.
For me this week, it's mostly work, which is kind of not surprising to anyone. Work is actually kicking my ass right now. We've been very very busy. I've been very very
Mm,
busy. I'm working across 3 different lines and kind of doing 2 jobs for most of this week. So I am on that hustle at the moment. Um, I'm going to, I believe it's this weekend, I'm going to the museum for a Titanic exhibition, which I think is pretty cool. Um, Other than that, yeah, not really all that much. If you're a gamer, the Nintendo Wii U and 3DS servers go offline tonight. Oh, I say tonight, maybe early Tuesday
yeah, I
morning
think
for us
yeah.
Australians. Um, they have served us well in the however long they've been alive. May they rest in peace. We salute you. Um, yeah. Other than that, we
Yeah, one
uh
last thing. You mentioned museums about the Titanic.
yes,
Are
I
you
did.
going before Saturday?
No, I'm going on Saturday.
Because I was going to say, if you've got any information about sinking ships, let Port know.
Uh
Hopefully, get us across the line.
I will write it
There we
down.
go. There's a bit of humor. My
I'm
one joke
going
for the
before
night.
your game, so I might have enough time.
Yeah, maybe.
Um, so yeah, I think we will wind this down here. Thank you all so much for coming to hang out with us this week. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Thank you for listening on Spotify. Um, Down below in the descriptions or on the screen here, you will find our socials. Check them out. You will find previous episodes of the podcast as well. Um, please be sure to support us on those. We're again trying to come up with more stuff to be more involved, but it's hard. Social media is a hard mistress. So
That's all
don't
right.
mind us if we're not that frequent
Yeah,
users of it.
we're pretty lonely people. If you send us a line, we'll probably talk back to you. So
Yeah,
if you ever want to chat, just
just give
pop
it
us through.
just give us a line. We will talk to you, or maybe we'll bring up any questions you have on the podcast itself.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so next week it is round 5. We will go through the highs and lows of that. We will talk about round 6. Again, it's only 8 games this week and 8 games next week because there are 2 more buys coming up. And then The week after is Anzac Eve and Anzac Day, two big blockbuster games, which could be very interesting to talk about, depending on how these upcoming weeks go. So
Yeah,
until
exactly.
then, we will thank you all again so much, and we will see you all next week.